Oh, hey, welcome back, guys. So, last go around, everything I worked on, it seems like I kind of got it to the point where I was doing pretty good, and then bang, I ran into some part I was missing, a fitting I didn't have, whatever. So, I'm still in a little bit in that boat. I've ordered a bunch of bits and bobs off Summit Racing's website to kind of get me, hopefully, as many of these things tailed off as I can. A couple of things I'm having a little bit of difficulty finding. First of all, remember our rear brake line is bigger diameter line than the front brake line. So the front one is like that 3/16, I think. It is the outside diameter, and the rear is 1/4 inch outside diameter. And so what that means is that fitting around that is bigger, and it's too big to fit into the bottom of that proportioning valve into that rear axle hole. So I need to figure out how I'm going to reduce that, and so far I can't find a fitting that does, so that might actually take a call off to the boys at Willwood to get to the bottom of that one. Secondly, while we're still talking about brakes, and I'll come back to the other thing I'm looking for, but while we're talking about brakes, while I sounded all confident about taking that factory proportioning valve and just kind of balancing it out so it's not doing anything 50-50, everything's going where it should, and let this proportioning valve up here at the master cylinder do the actual balance work. I'm worried that that's not going to work. I'm worried that if I get into that valve and mess with it, it might still be adjusting the flow of the brake pressure more than I want it to when I've done, changed my flow up here with this valve. So while I probably sounded real confident that I'd figured that out, that one's just been rattling around in my brain the whole time, and I'm not sure that's going to stay. So what my goal is today is I'm going to pull that old valve off, and I'm going to take it up here on the bench, and I'm going to lay out a cowl and take that thing, open it up if I can, and pull out the valve part, and see if I feel like I could actually get it where it's passing everything through without modifying the pressure of the two different flows, if that makes sense, if you understand what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is, if I adjust the balance up here on this proportioning valve at the master cylinder, then I don't want that second valve modifying that pressure at all. Whatever I tell it to do up here, I want it to pass straight through all the way through, and I'm just not 100% sure that that second valve won't do something to maybe bleed between the two or whatever. So I got to investigate that a little bit before I decide if that's going to stay or if that's going to come out. If it's going to come out, then I'll just get some female to female adapters and put the lines together that way. So we'll discover that one together. The other thing that I said I'm having a hard time finding is right up here on the water pump, where the output side is for the water that's supposed to go back to the heater block. That output fitting is 3/4 inch. And the fitting that goes into the heater block is 5/8 inch. I know somewhere along the line I've seen a molded heater hose that is 5/8 all the way along, and then it flares out a little bit to fit that 3/4 inch fitting. I just can't find one of those online anywhere where I'm looking right now, but I know I've seen one in my travels as I've been out there trying to spread the wealth of shopping a little bit on everybody's sites between Summit Racing and Quadratech and Rock Auto once in a while, and Napa Online, and even back in the day Morris 4x4 before those guys bugged me so much I quit buying anything from them. So I still got to do a little digging on that one because I just haven't found that fitting. But I did get, I talked about the stainless steel hose clamps. I got those all coming, things like that. I got the return line fitting coming. So we'll be in good shape when all that stuff shows up. I'll probably be here next week. But for right now, it'll be electrical work and wire looms and dealing with that brake proportioning valve to begin with, and then we'll go from there. Now, when I get under the frame here and I'm redoing that wire loom for that line back to my fuel pump, I'm probably not going to be able to show you much of that. But you did see, I'll probably show you when I'm done, but you did see me under there at one point kind of, I drilled and tapped those holes into the frame to hold my little hose clamps or my little clamps. So I'll just take those off, pull that off, pull the loom off, put the new loom on, and put it back in place. Not a big deal, but I will give you a quick look when I'm done, show you what it looks like. And then we'll turn our attention to that proportioning valve, that factory one, and we'll learn a little bit about that together. Now, one thing I will say, I know I'm getting a little wordy here, but I do want to, two things I want to address. One, I did ask if you, by and large, wanted me to not make a video if I was traveling enough, you know, exploring Capitol Reef or something like that. And the jury came back, my informal poll there, comments are mixed. So some of you said, oh no, we don't mind it, leave it in. Other of you just said, no, just the Jeep stuff. So I'm just gonna do what I like to do, and I like filming some of that other stuff too. So I'll tell you, all those folks that said, you know, just the Jeep stuff, no offense if you jump past one that isn't the Jeep stuff. I won't be offended, and I hope you won't be offended that I didn't, you know, kind of heed your wishes and only do Jeep stuff, but you know, life is life, and I travel once in a while. So I'll still keep it mixed up. Those of you who don't mind those, well, there you go. Second thing that I've now heard in several instances, like when I was working on the front hubs, putting those back together, you know, I had the camera there and I was watching, you know, putting all the pieces in, and a couple of people were like, hey man, just do that in real time so that we can see exactly what you're doing when you're doing it, so that when we're doing our own hubs, we have something to follow. And a lot of times when I'm kind of editing the videos, when I hit a point like that where I'm just putting something back together, I kind of go, well, no one's going to want to watch that. I'll just speed it up a little bit. So point taken. Those of you who are following along or doing your own restore, if you're looking to these videos to be showing you exactly how to do something, I apologize for racing through it on you. So here's what we'll do. When I feel like I'm doing something that someone else might need to see, how exactly did I do that, I'll try to be a little bit more aware of that, and I'll let that run in real time. As I'm doing the videos, I may still speed up, you know, when I got the ratchet in my hand and I'm just tightening something down, so you don't get bored with that. But the rest of the time, if I am doing something where you want to be able to look at it and go, okay, I want to see exactly how those pieces went back together, then I'll just try to do those in real time. Might make the videos a little bit longer, but there is that little thing in YouTube where you can just grab the slider and slide along, and maybe I'll do a little bit more work to kind of put the chapter marks in there, you know, so you can jump forward to chapters and so forth. So I am listening to you all, and I'm trying to do my best to make sure that what I learn doing these projects, you know, I can share with others. That's kind of the whole point of this. So point taken, I'll stop speeding through the technical part of this work. I'll speed through the boring stuff, and hopefully if we can get me to shut up a little bit, then there won't be so long with me yammering at you. But anyway, that's enough talking for right this minute. It's time to actually get some work done. So let's do that. Okay, what I've done today is I pulled off my distributor cap and just kind of shoved it back out of the way, because we're going after this connector right here, which is our water temperature sending unit. And we're going after this unit down here, which is our oil pressure sending unit. And both of those wires are in this bundle right here that come out, and we're the engine compartment bundle out of the Painless Wiring harness. So for some of these, the little tab, you know, had to be taken off, but I'll just remind you quickly that Painless Wiring does kind of laser print or somehow print the actual wire, what it is, on the insulation of the wire right there. So even if the little tab is gone, you can still figure out which is the right wire for everything. So I'll get started on those. It will be our first pass with our new crimping tool today, so we'll see how that goes. And sorry for the noise there, but anyway, we'll see about that, getting that done. And I've got a couple of wires that will go to our coil up here as well. So those are in this batch as well, the plus and minus for the coil. So let's tear into it. Remember how I said Painless Wiring did a really great job of printing the wire on it, the description of where it goes? Well, that's like 24 gauge wire, and I can't read it. So I had to go to the store and get me a silly dang magnifying glass so I can read these little tiny print on these little tiny things. So if you're thinking about getting old, don't. It's not that great. Okay, well, before I bail under this thing, I thought I'd show you what we got to deal with. So this is our connector that's coming back from the painless wiring harness, or from the, actually I think it's the fuel injection system. So this is our factory made cable, and I think I have some crimp-on connectors that will go in there, although I'll look and see, maybe they gave me a connector that fits into this guy. And this is stuff that I ran myself coming forward with just a run of red and black for power and ground, with this curvy, snaky stuff that the wire comes out of and so forth. So I'm gonna go undo all that and redo it with our Powerbraid from Painless Wiring. Not a sponsor, but you can see I've only got 2 wires in there. I think it's gonna fit really nicely in here, and that's gonna be a much more positive protection layer for that wiring than this stuff. So that's what I'm gonna do now. All right, guys, well, under the heading of, yeah, generally they do send you everything you need. I have got, this is the fuel pump line that came with the Edelbrock system. So you can see it says fuel pump right there. And this connector was in the box. So this is how it's terminated in the kit that's coming, you know, from the fuel injection system. This little connector was in this kit, this part number 371791, which has my waterproof sealant, or little seals around the wiring itself, and then the connectors that I crimp onto there and push into this, and off we go. So I have all my old wiring out to redo the loom. I'll be taking off all these hose clamps and putting them around the new smaller loom. That should be okay. If not, I do have smaller hose clamps, but I don't think I'll need them. And I did just snip this back at the pump, because I don't know if you remember, but when I was hooking up to the pump, I bent one of the connectors over, and I was a little bit worried that I might have fatigued it enough to where it may break eventually. So I'm just gonna redo that completely. So yeah, it's all out. Now all I gotta do is put it back in. This wire is, like I said, this is long enough. What this connection is gonna be somewhere back around in the area of the transfer case. So I'll probably tie it up there to the side of the transfer case harness. And part of this will be in some of the hose clamps I took off of this thing. So yeah, everything's going along pretty well. I'll get that done, then I'll show you what it looks like when I've got it. All right, so I just thought I'd show you what I've done here. So I've redone my connectors, and what I did is you slide the little hood on there first so that you don't forget to put it on there. And then you slip a little piece of shrink wrap on. The red wire had a bigger connector than the black wire, and so that way you can't put them on the wrong post on the pump. And then I just take that heat gun and shrink the shrink tube around there, and those look nice and tidy and are ready to have these hoods slipped over them once they're back on the fuel pump. So now I'll get that in my braid and off we go. Now I guess it could be argued that the shrink wrap was a little bit of overkill on here, because we are putting these waterproof boots over it. But in my opinion, there's no such thing as overkill when you're doing electrical, especially on a critical system like your fuel pump. So there we go. That's that end. I'm gonna roughly measure this out, and then I'll build my other end to go into my connector there, and we'll be off and running. So we're gonna start up here at the front. So I did have 1/2 inch brackets there before. I changed down to 3/8 inch, and that fit those factory prepared shroud around the cabling. So hold on, we're gonna go to the back here. So here's my connector that I built, and I kind of put a loop in the cable there and then put the connector in there. So if we have to undo it, we can undo it without having to take everything out of the hose clamps. And then I put new, like I said, 3/8 inch clamps all the way around. Re-terminated my wires here on the pump. Everything is all done. All right, I took apart this factory brake proportioning valve that was down on the frame. And I'm gonna bypass this thing because it doesn't look like there's any way to actually change the way this directs the pressure front to back. It looks like it's all just kind of spring-loaded valves in there. And so
I'm just not sure I would ever be able to get, you know, to where I was sure this thing wasn't messing with my flow even after I've adjusted it up top. So I think we're gonna bail on this thing.
All right, here we are back into the Jeep, and you can see I've got the valve out from here, and here is our 2 lines that go to the front brakes. So what I'm going to do is I think I can get a female to female connector here, and I'll just build a new line to head up to the proportioning valve. And in that new valve, there is a spot up there for the 2 front brakes to be individually tapped into that thing. So we'll just do 2 lines up there for that. And then here's our rear line, and same thing here. Now, another thing that I'll point out while I'm under here is this is that hard line return line for the gas tank that I mentioned before that I was a little bit worried about. I'm going to cut this off right about here, and this is my rubber hose coming down from the valve or from the fuel pressure regulator, and we're going to put that on right there, and that's where we're going to tap into our return line, and that way we'll be out of the way of the headers and we shouldn't burst into flames. So that's our progress for this aspect of things. Obviously I've got to get me some brake line and that flaring tool and some fittings and so forth, although I have a few fittings from what came with that proportioning valve. So need to get some more supplies, and then we'll be ready to keep moving along on that part.
So it turns out I did have one extra fitting for the fuel pressure regulator here, and it was a kind of a 30-degree angle fitting or whatever, which I think is going to work out okay. So there's our lines all plumbed in, clamped down, tightened up, everything ready to go. We're just waiting on that little vacuum line. That's the last piece we need, and then the fuel pressure regulator will be fully installed. Okay, while we're waiting for some other parts, I drug out those shiny parts we got. I think that's what we got from that BJ's Off-Road, was all these shiny pulleys and our alternator bracket here. So I've got the alternator bracket in place roughly. It's not tightened down yet, but you can see we got 3/4 inch spacers here that bring the bracket here out to give us enough room to get our hose on there to go over to our heater core. And then look at that bad boy right there. That's our adjustment for the bottom of the alternator. That's a nice looking piece of kit right there. So that's about as far as we can get with that until we get our alternator there, but then our alternator is going to go right here, and I think we got a fancy pulley for the front of it as well that will match up to that fancy pulley there. And pretty sure we got a new one for our power steering pump. So that looks all right. Looks pretty solid. It's pretty beefy stuff. It's billet aluminum, I believe, and they've done a nice job of machining that out. Looks pretty good. By the way, one thing I wanted to make sure that we covered here was, if you'll go back a few episodes, you'll see me buying these grade 8 bolts and clamping them up in the vise and taking my tap and die set and cutting the threads further up this thing. And I think I had to take longer bolts and then cut them off. I went through quite a bit of trouble to build these bolts to be the size that I needed to go here and here and here. And now I just took all 3 of those out and replaced them with those bolts that were provided by the guys that did these brackets. So I needed none of those at the end of the day. So there you go. If you're following along at home, don't make long bolts like that if you're going to buy this alternator bracket kit, because it comes with everything you need in it, and you're not going to need those long bolts. All right, well, I think that I'm at a spot where I'm going to not feel too bad if we kind of wrap this up for the weekend. So before I go, I did want to show you a couple things I haven't got to yet. That I did dig out the extra pulley. I think I mentioned there was one more fancy pulley to go on the front. This goes on the alternator. It's a 2-piece unit. So obviously what we're going to do is we're going to put the bolt or the nut on there that's going to hold that on the alternator shaft, I believe, and then we're going to screw this thing to that piece. So that's for the alternator. Let me bring you around front here, and I'll show you. I've got the new pulley on the water pump here, not bolted on yet, because obviously what's got to be bolted to that is our fan. But I did grab the old fan out of the pile, and it's a flex fan. It was red. I started sanding it down, cleaning it up a little bit. There's a little bit of rust on there, so gonna get that all cleaned up. And I think what I'm thinking is I might do blue here where the red was, so I think that'll look all right. That alternator pulley will be down right about here, and that will definitely look good. And I did get my water temperature sending unit back in there I got my wire to it. I don't have a nut on that sending unit right now. I did get the oil pressure sending unit wired up. There are a few wires in this that I identified that we won't be using. As an example, there's one that says it's for an electronic choke, and obviously there is no choke. That fuel injection system will take care of that for us. There's one that would turn on the air conditioning compressor on and off. We don't have air conditioning on this, so we won't be using that. So there's a couple of wires that we won't be using in that harness, but everything else will be getting terminated up. I need to get me a starter solenoid because some of them go to that. So yeah, we're getting close to being done with the wiring in the engine compartment here. Next go around, I think I'll try to get back on those brake lines, because if I can get the brakes buttoned up over there, I now have my fuel pressure regulator all sorted out, except for what I need to do to get that return line cut into the hard line, but that's down underneath. So where I'm going is, I think we could probably put that fender on the other side with the stuff I've got done right now. Although if I am going to paint this thing myself, that fender doesn't have the same restriction this passenger side one does, where that heater box is in the way of all the bolts. So I could potentially leave that off if I'm to paint this thing in the garage here, and paint that fender freestanding, just sitting on the table or something. So there I go again. I said I might paint this thing myself. Seriously, you know, Gray was over here today and we were talking about that, and I was explaining to them what I thought the pros and cons of that were. And I said, at the end of the day, if it just turns out to be a disaster, it's not like I've welded something on that can't be undone. I can just sand the bad paint off and take it in and have someone paint it. So that's the reason I keep kind of dancing around doing that myself. This would be the point where I'd like to hear your thoughts, if you have any on that. You know, if you think I'm just flat nuts to be even thinking about that, having never painted anything before other than out of a rattle can, or if you're thinking like me that what's the worst that could happen is you buy a gun and then you wind up making a mess and you have to have someone do it anyway and you're out the cost of a gun. Throw that on eBay and sell it to someone else who knows how to paint, and then there you go, you're all done. So yeah, do I sound like a guy who's convinced himself? I'm getting close to that, I think. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you have liked this video, click the little like button down there. That'll help the YouTube machine throw this up in front of more people. And if you haven't subscribed, I think I mentioned the other day, I was surprised to find that people still think it costs something to subscribe to a YouTube channel. It does not. It's free. And then you know you're not going to miss another episode. And if you do subscribe, the idea is you want to click that little bell button next to it, and then you get notified when I post the videos. I generally do try to post one of these every Saturday though, so if that's the schedule. If you're not doing anything on Saturday, come visit with me and let's see what we got going on. But again, drop me a comment down below. Let me think what you think of this idea of painting this thing myself, and I will see you next time around.